Okay, Madam Chair, we are ready to begin. If you'll give me about 5 seconds to let the others into the meeting.
Sure.
Okay, you can go ahead and begin. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Welcome. It is 5:32 and I am calling the May 4, 2021 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board to order. So please silence any cell phones or barking dogs or noise that you have behind us. And may we please have a roll call?
Yes, good morning or good evening, everyone. Member Rosenau.
Here.
Member Miller.
Here.
Member Kaiser.
Here.
Member Hanson.
Here.
Member Dixon.
Present.
Vice Chair Nelson. And Chair Huff.
Present.
You have a quorum.
May we please have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, the agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of the Council Chamber in accordance with applicable law.
Does the board have any revisions to the agenda?
No.
Nope. So may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I will.
Eric?
Move to approve as presented.
Okay, so Eric raised his hand. Linda, do you want to second, Linda Dixon?
Second.
Okay. And is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? So motion passes 7-0. Next is public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values everybody's comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items that are not listed on the posted agenda. So there are 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will be taken at the time of the hearing later on. So staff, has anyone requested to comment on a non-public hearing item or an item that is not on today's agenda?
We've not gotten any comments or requests from the public to speak during public comment. There are a couple of individuals who have asked to speak during the public hearing on item 2A.
Okay. So seeing no speakers for the general public comment, we will proceed to the consent agenda. So looking at the minutes, are there any revisions to the minutes of the meeting of April 6, 2021?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think that several of us commented on Chair Burkett's leaving, and I think somewhere in the minutes it should be documented that this board really appreciated all he's done and his time on the board.
Okay, so the revision would be for comments from the board on Burkett's contributions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And we
Okay.
thanked him
Yes.
for his service.
Okay, so may I have that motion to approve the minutes of April 6, 2021 with that revision?
So moved.
Okay, and so Linda Dixon, and may I have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, Janet Hanson. So I have a motion by Linda Dixon and a second by Janet Hanson. Is there any discussion about that? Okay, seeing none, All those in favor of the motion with revisions, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? So motion passes 7-0. Let's proceed to agenda item 2A.
Wait, I'm sorry, can you hear me? This is Peter Marzzi. I actually wanted to speak on item 4A. Did I miss that opportunity already?
No, you're coming up.
For 4A, because it's not a public hearing, I realized. It's not, so.
Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. I thought you were speaking on 2A. That's
No.
my mistake. Yes, if you'd like to speak on item 4A, now would be the time.
Well, then I will do it.
Sorry
This is
about
regarding
that.
the House of Tomorrow, and the concern of the Palm Springs Modern Committee is that not only is there, concern about the lack of a permit in the work that's being done, but also we strongly support the staff recommendation that there be a stay, I think 120-day stay on additional work being done, and also that the property clearly qualifies for designation as a Class 1 historic site, for so many reasons. So that is the statement of the Modern Committee, and we look forward to hearing your discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Did we miss anybody else for those public comments?
No one else that I'm aware of.
Okay, so now we will proceed to the agenda item 2A, public hearings. It's an application by Michael Horn, owner for the historic designation of the Crockett residence. May we please have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Hmm.
As noted in your staff report, this is a building, a single-family residence that was designed in 1951 by architectural designer Herbert Burns for Merrill and Juanita Crockett. As noted in your staff report, beginning on page 2, the project shows the project site. And on page 3, you see the current condition of the home, as well as a rendering done by the designer in 1950. And as you can see there, much remains of the original design intent. The analysis of this project against the criteria for designation begins on page 4 of your staff report. And as noted there, this site, we believe, qualifies as a historic site under several different categories on the list. Excuse me. As a example of a post-World War II project that represents the embrace of modernism by developers and residents of the city of Palm Springs, and that it embodies the artistic work of, I'm having a problem here, of Herbert Burns, whose almost trademark details on this house are completely evident, with his secondary fascia, the piers of long horizontally cut Arizona sandstone, the indoor-outdoor quality, and several other factors. As noted on page 6 of your staff report, Burns was credited with the design of many projects in the tennis club neighborhood, including the Town and Desert Apartments, the 400 building, the Village Manor, Desert Hills Apartments, and the Holiday House. Burns was also fairly prolific in other residential designs throughout the city. So for those reasons, we've identified that the building qualifies as a historic site under those criteria. I did note in the staff report, the author of the report asserts that the Crockett residence also embodies the distinctive characteristics of a particular type or method of construction, recognizing it under the late modern style of architecture. I've provided some information that I dug around trying to further substantiate this, and it's noted on page 5 and 10, the information that I had found about it. My assertion on this is that while the Crockett residence is thoroughly modern in its architectural style, the report does not make a compelling case that it is a noteworthy example of late modern architecture. The notes on page 5 notes that the style is characterized by horizontality, flat roofs, minimal ornamentation. All of those qualities certainly are present here. Horizontal bands of bezeled or banded windows do not exist. Aluminum louvers does not exist. Operable seal sash has been removed and replaced with replacement windows, and projecting window frames do not exist. So although the project has very much a modern flavor to it, we did not assert that the report had made a compelling case in that particular criteria. As it relates to integrity, however, we've gone through the various qualities of integrity and identified that this home does possess strong historic integrity in terms of its design, setting, materials, and workmanship, and association with Herbert Burns. On page 9 of your staff report is a list of the proposed defining characteristics, including the thin horizontal fascia, the asymmetrical floor plan, and so on, that are listed there on page 10. The non-contributing features that were identified were the aluminum replacement windows and sliding glass doors and the desert landscaping in the front yard. So in conclusion, we believe that the project does meet the definition of a Class 1 historic site based on criteria 3 and 5, and that it does possess significant historic integrity to qualify it as such. And our recommendation is for the board to consider a recommendation to the City Council for Class 1 historic landmark designation of this site. This is a public hearing. The applicant is in the audience here and would like to speak further on this. At least he was.
Yeah, right here.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I see you there, Stephen. Thank you. So that concludes my staff report. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Does the board have any questions of the staff first? Any questions for staff?
No,
Anyone?
no.
Okay, so I will, seeing no further questions of the staff, I will open the public hearing. And does the applicant wish to speak? As Mr. Lyon indicated, you were present.
Yes.
Okay,
Everyone.
so welcome, Mr. Horn. And is there anything else that you would like to tell us about your application beyond Ken's report, or want to reemphasize or state? Just for the record, please state your full name and your address, and you do have 10 minutes to present. And then you also will have 2 minutes of rebuttal if desired after all the hundreds of public comments that will come forth. So welcome, Mr. Horn.
Well, thank you. I don't have a lot of comments. I think I believe that Stephen has some comments, and since he has an awful lot more knowledge on this topic, I'll actually leave a lot of those comments up to him. But I can tell you that, you know, I'm very much a neophyte in terms of historical architecture, which I'm sure a lot of you noticed when you're on the site visits, but I've learned just an enormous amount and becoming more and more enthusiastic about this through, you know, as far as the knowledge that has been imparted by, first of all, Stephen, and then all of you on the site visits who are so knowledgeable, even knowledgeable about my house, which I was amazed at. Some of you have been in my house and you know more about my house than I do, frankly. So it's been a really a great process for me, because I've learned a lot and I'm becoming more and more enthusiastic. Obviously, I wouldn't have started this process if I wasn't interested and enthusiastic and to start with. But as I've gone through the process, I'm certainly have a greater understanding of the importance of architectural preservation in Palm Springs. And I'll leave any further comments up to Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horn. We appreciate all your efforts and your good passion for preservation, of course. So I believe Mr. Keelan, would you like to speak next for the public comment on this item?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Keelan. I live at 1141 South Calle Marcus in Palm Springs. And I was the author of the nomination. I'm vice president of the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation. And PSPF enthusiastically supports this going forward as a Class 1. I'm happy that Mr. Lyon is recommending that it go forward as a Class 1. The only thing I was sort of disappointed in was that he didn't think I provided a compelling argument that it represents late modern design. So there's sort of a background. When I began writing the Herbert Burns book, I believed Herbert Burns designed primarily in the late modern style, though at the time he wouldn't have called it that. That's something architectural historians, invented later on. But like Mr. Lyons, I found very little written about late modern, and what I did find was primarily written about commercial architecture. So I contacted Alan Hess, who's a friend and who had, in his book about Palm Springs Modern, the showman had remarked that Herbert Burns designed in the late modern style and gave a really brief description, which I included in the nomination. And so he said, you're right, there's been very little written and especially nothing written about residential late modern. So welcome, go ahead, you do it. I wrote a whole chapter, a whole sort of context statement about the late modern style, focusing on residential in the Herbert Burns book. And so I pulled some of those elements into the nomination, hoping that that would be a compelling argument, but I guess it wasn't. But some of the things that late modern, was influenced by, these architects were influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright and his Usonian homes and Falling Water. And so what you see Herbert Burns doing is organizing his homes around these monolithic sandstone pylons in opposing. One will be one way, one will be the other. Usually one's a fireplace and one's really just a decorative element, which helps create a strong composition. Other things are the floating soffits, which extend into the inside of the house and are often uplit. And late modern really does have more decorative touches than international style or post and beam style. And you'll see that in those vertical steel poles that are used and the louvers, often these big box grids. Other architects working with this were Paul Williams and H. Roy Kelly and Burton Schutt and lots of different people around Beverly Hills and Los Angeles. So I shared with Alan what Ken had written, and he wrote me back saying, no, this is definitely a work of late modern. And so I shared those with Ken. So I firmly say that this Crockett residence is a work of late modern. It's one of Herbert Burns designed, I don't know, a handful of houses, 3 really great sort of lavish houses, the Gilman House, the Crockett House, and then the house next to Frank Sinatra's. And what Mr. Horn has done to restore the carport situation really improved. And he tells me now that he wants to remove there's some built-in closets built around the 2 steel vertical poles. He wants to restore that condition, which will really enhance that, because that secondary fascia turns into the carport roof, and then with those 2 really thin poles creates this really startling effect of this roof line that's floating in space, or seems to be. He's also interested in perhaps restoring the paint colors to the house. I think that it's even going to improve and become more like what Herbert Burns had envisioned for the house, especially on the facade that one sees off Linda Vista Road. I don't think I have any other comments. I'm open to answer any questions you may have, but thank you for all that you do and for considering our nomination.
Thank you, Mr. Keelan. Do we have any other speakers in the audience who wish to speak in public comment on this item? Is there any other audience person? Okay.
We had not gotten any other requests to speak on this item, Madam Chair. I don't know if any of the other people who are in the meeting with us here today wish to speak on that. If any of you do, please turn your video camera on so we can have the chair recognize you.
Okay.
Looks
And-
like that's it.
Okay, and then Mr. Horn, did you wish to make any additional comments of rebuttal at this time, or are you good with those
Good.
comments? Good, okay. So seeing no further speakers on this item, I will now close the public hearing. So the action is now with the board, and I invite discussion amongst the board members. If anyone would like to speak first, please raise your hand. Mr. Nelson? Mr. Nelson?
Thank you. So first of all, just a huge thank to Mr. Horn for coming on board with the nomination for Class 1 designation, and to Mr. Keelan and the Preservation Foundation, as always, for finding these gems and making sure that they get written up and protected. When I was at the site visit, there was some discussion with the owner, Mr. Horn, about restoring the original paint color, which he believed may be a pink or dusty rose or something of that nature. And I would just like to ask the rest of the board to consider that we, in our motion, request that it be returned to the original color if they're able to find it on the building and not some alternate. And I know that Mr. Keelan has a very good resource of the bone colors and paint swatches from the period and that kind of thing. The other question I had for the applicant was about the wood planter that appears in one of the original renderings, which was most likely made from redwood, perhaps something else, but I think Bones used redwood. And it was under the window, just to the right of the front door, and wondering if it ever got built, if we know, and regardless of whether it was built and moved, if there are any plans to try to rebuild that and put it back.
So Mr. Horn, would you like
Yeah,
to?
I hadn't thought about that, to be honest, but it's not, it's a good idea. As far as I know, it certainly wasn't there when I bought the house. And it's on the basis of the photos that were shot in 1956 by Julius Schulman, it doesn't appear in those either. So I would assume it wasn't there, but it certainly, well, it certainly appears actually in the sketch by OEL Graves. So yeah, it's not a bad idea. You know, there was a lot of good ideas well brought up actually during each of the site visits, and that's another one, frankly. So.
It was built, so they do show up in the Showman photos, and it probably was natural redwood, which I believe the board and batten to the left of the front door was a natural wood element too.
So Mrs. Dixon? You're muted. Mrs. Dixon, you're muted. You're muted. Start again.
Not yet.
Start again, Linda. Unmute and begin.
Can't hear you. There you go. You've got it there.
Okay.
Start again, Linda.
Okay, hello.
Hi.
Regarding the picture window in front that we see in the sketch, has any thought been given to replacing the smaller window with a window, the type of the window in the sketch? And then the landscaping, it looks like the landscaping in the sketch was grass. Someone said that there were more pictures. And Steve, I know you're just excellent with landscaping. Have you given any thought to any changes to the landscaping?
So regarding your first question about the picture window, when Mr. Horn replaced the windows, he maintained the original openings. So the windows have not gotten any larger or smaller than the as-built conditions. I think in terms of the landscape, the original landscape was probably done by the Crockett's. So it's not, I wouldn't consider it a significant landscape by, someone along the lines of Garrett Eckbo or Tommy Thompson. What's there is, the original palms are still there. Olives have been added over time and those are there, but the grass has been turned to rock and gravel and that sort of thing, which, it is more drought tolerant, but
Yeah.
because it wasn't the work of a master landscape architect, I wouldn't say that it's the original landscape would be considered significant.
So what you're saying is the window that we see in the sketch was not the same window as the house above?
Which window do you mean in the sketch?
I'm looking at this on page 3 of 10. The rendering of the home by designer C 1950. And then the top, it says a recent photo of the Crockett residence.
Yeah, I think what happened is that was a rendering by artist OEL Graves based on the blueprints. But when the house was built, I think that window was made smaller to accommodate that redwood planter in reality.
If you look on page 28 of the Historic Resources Report, you can see the actual working drawings, and the window that exists today is generally the same size and shape and location as you see on those actual blueprint drawings by Burns. So I would agree with Stephen. It seems as though the rendering may have taken some artistic liberties on it, but the ultimate final design appears to have been the smaller window that we see today.
Yeah, Graves was an exuberant artist. The house is way more pink than it ever would have been too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion? Anyone raise their hand? Mrs. Hanson.
Ms. please.
Hanson.
Happily Ms. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe touch on the qualification of the property or what Stephen had talked about in classifying it as an excellent example of the late modern. And I don't know if there's anyone who wanted to revisit that. I'm not sure if Stephen, you expressed some disappointment. Is that I'm new on the board, so I'm not exactly sure how the discussions would go on issues like that, where staff might disagree. And then of course the report said one thing. I can say that, I agree that, there isn't much written on late modern, certainly not a lot on residential. And sometimes it's difficult to use comparisons of commercial properties for a residential property when trying to decide whether or not it retains the character defining features of a particular style. So, and certainly I have a huge amount of respect for Alan Hess, who is, also a colleague, and he worked with us in Los Angeles on quite a few of the historic contexts relating to architecture. And he is pretty much an expert on almost every architectural style. As I've come to find, he's very seldom wrong. And I also think, obviously this fits into the broader category of mid-century modern. And in some ways, it even has some of the characteristics of what Alan would call a custom ranch, except that it has a flat roof. Typically you'd find a pitched roof, even though it might be very low pitched. So I don't know. I mean, I do agree with staff. I think maybe there could have been more information to beef up that discussion, to really make that finding. And I don't know if there's any desire, it obviously meets several criteria and it only needs to be one. So, this may be a moot point, but I don't know if Stephen, if you were interested in, maybe after talking to Alan or whatever to, adding anything else to that discussion, or if everybody's fine with, let's go with the 3 findings that have been made by staff and kind of call it a day.
Mr. Nelson.
Yes, I would like to concur with Member Hanson's comment and thank her for raising that, because I would really glad to see Mr. Keelan come on and explain about the late modern style. And having read his book on Herbert Burns and having a copy, maybe as a suggestion, when future nominations are written for Herbert Burns properties, there could be a reference or a footnote to read the chapter in the book that talks about the late modern. But personally, I've always believed, ever since I became aware of Burns, that he was one of the top 3, perhaps, arbiters of this late modern style upon his arrival here in the mid-1940s, which would have predated Weldon Beckett and Richard Neutra's arrival even. So I think it's important to note that he could have been one of the earliest practicing designers to bring that style to the desert, but he may have not been as recognized or well-known back then, and obviously Beckett or Neutra were. So I think this is a really good opportunity in this nomination to single that out and really make it crystal clear that this being 1950, one of his earlier residential commission, that it is a clear example, but you can obviously see it in the Hideaway as well, which was the town and desert from 1947, which he actually began in 46. So just wanted to throw that out there and thank Member Hanson again for driving that point home.
Oh, I can respond if you'd like. You know, there is a chapter I can provide my book to anyone who doesn't have it. I think most of you probably do from being at the event. But if anyone's interested, I can get you a copy. You know, I think Mr. Lyons's sort of evaluation that it doesn't qualify as late modern is based on 2 sentences in HRG's report, and I tried to provide, you know, more context, bullet points about what late modern style often was, including the decorative elements that people like Morris Lapidus used in the commercial side. So I'm not sure how else I could now, at this point before you vote, change your mind. But you know, it's going to be class 1 as long as sounds like it's going along those lines. So I just wanted to voice my disappointment, and now that's all.
So any other discussion? I thank everyone for their comments, and this is good, you know, documentation for future research, future publications, you know, that goes on and evolves as we all learn more and know more and research more. So all good discussion. Is there any additional comments that wish to be made at this time? Anyone else? Mr. Lyon?
I just want to suggest, if between this hearing today and the time when we get this prepared for City Council at their public hearing, maybe I can work with Steve Kalon and we can look for some other sources to help document and substantiate this as a late modern building. I'm not opposed to that. I just think that when we look at what we have as far as that which is in writing to describe the style, the home kind of falls short in that regard. I don't doubt that it's from that particular period, but I think we need to do something more to, if you want to say from an academic point of view, substantiate that assertion. So I'm willing to work with him during the period between now and the public hearing of the City Council, see if we can maybe come up with additional information somewhere out there in the written material to bring that point home.
Mr. Keelan?
Like I said, there wasn't any more written material, which is why Alan and I worked together on that context statement. So I don't know what we could find between now and then that I haven't written. So I'm ready to just let it go.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr.
I just have a suggestion that, you know, you might even consider though, Stephen, adding the information from Alan Hess into the report as an expert. You know, I mean, just like people quote Robert Winter in Los Angeles,
Right?
and take that as sort of fact, but you might be able to, you know, I mean, it might not take that much more information, I'm saying, you know, to do that. And I think as board member Nelson pointed out, you know, if there's going to be more nominations by this particular architect, you know, it'd be nice to kind of set the precedent for an understanding of his work as maybe being in the late modern, or conversely, you know, maybe that would come later with more nominations and more research. But I'm good, whatever you all decide, but I think,
Yeah, I am writing another one now. So I think with that one, I'll include a copy of the book with each nomination. But I did provide Mr. Lyon, Alan Hess's assessment that last week that he agrees it is a late modern style with his bullet points on why he sees it that way. So I can create a revised edition to this and send it, or do an errata page or something.
Good. Okay, thank you. Any additional other comments? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, just a bit of housekeeping, and I apologize to Ken for not noting this sooner and doing this offline. The staff report header actually shows a typo. It shows the Crocker residence instead of the Crockett residence. So we have an opportunity to correct that before it goes to council.
Very good. That's important.
Thank you.
Want to get the spelling.
I thought I caught that already, so thank you
Yeah,
for that, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so seeing no further discussions, may I have a motion, please? Mr. Kaiser?
I move that we accept the staff report.
I'll second the motion. Would the maker of the motion and be willing to include that staff include the Alan Hess assessment in the documents going to City Council?
Yes.
And that paint color? What do
And
you,
the paint color be,
Mr. Kaiser, on your motion?
I think we've got to be careful with the paint color. We can recommend it, but I think it needs to be put in the motion as a recommendation that it be returned to original colors if possible.
Okay.
It's a very touchy issue, and I don't think we're ready to codify it yet.
Sure. So the recommendation, accept the report with the recommendation to research and look into the paint color. And Ms. Dixon, you're the second on that, correct?
yes.
Okay. So is there any further discussion? Any further discussion at this point? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Very good, thank you. So moving on to unfinished business, there is no unfinished business. So let us proceed to agenda item 4A. This is an application by Paul Armistead and Daniel Bridge, owners, for approval of alterations to the House of Tomorrow. May I please have a staff report on this project?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This project was brought to the attention of the city through some discussions with contractors at the site, in which we discovered that there had been work done on the site without building permits and without approvals by the HSPB or the HPO. So as noted in your staff report, the project was issued a stop work order by the building department. And I communicated with the property owners of the need for this to be reviewed and permits provided prior to any work commencing. Unfortunately, as you can see on some of the images in your staff report, there's already been some degree of substantial demolition. The terrazzo pool terrace has been completely removed. There's construction work occurring on the interior of the home. Landscape changes have occurred. And so there is a lot of material that has happened here, unfortunately, a little ahead of the game, so to speak. This is a Class 3 historic site. And when the board considers an application for alteration or demolition of a Class 3 site, the board has two particular findings to make. And the action of the board is not in this case to approve the scope of work as being quote unquote consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards. The action of the board is to consider whether or not there appears to be enough material and information that the house or the property may be potentially historically significant to warrant initiating an application to redesignate. So that is what your call is before you today. The applicant has provided a great wealth of information in terms of what they are desiring to do to the home. Through my conversations with the owners, their intent is to do a sensitive restoration of the home. They do not intend to keep the home. They intend to then put the home back up for sale. So in the staff report, you're going to see the analysis that we provided relative to the criteria for considering whether something may be historically significant under our ordinance. So when you look at the staff report beginning on page 5 is the analysis against that criteria. And from there you can see, we believe there may be conditions here at this site that would warrant its possible designation as a class 1 or class 2 site. The conclusion that I've placed on this on the end of your staff report is that it appears to meet criteria 2, 3, 4, and 5, and that it does appear to retain significant historic integrity to warrant redesignation to class 1. So the staff recommendation on this is for the board to direct that a redesignation application be initiated and that a stay of demolition be placed on the property. Now, the applicant is here and wants to speak to this item also. There has been some discussion about the fact that there is work that has occurred on the interior of the home. As you know, the historic designation of a private property does not apply to the interiors. So in this instance, while the work has occurred on the interior and there's more work that the owner would like to do, that interior work would not be considered as a qualifying factor in your decision tonight. So that is our recommendation at staff level, is to place the stay and initiate further research on the property. The owner does wish to further comment on the application, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. So let's first ask if, does the board have any questions of staff? Any staff questions? Mrs. Dixon?
Yes, on page 8 of 9, it says under materials. In that paragraph, were you referring to the current owners as the people who did the unauthorized demolition?
Yes.
Okay. Have the current owners ever done any other projects in Palm Springs?
Yes.
So they're probably familiar with permits and historic preservation and things, I can assume.
I would assume so.
Okay. And the last few pages of our report, where we have a copy of the Department of Parks and Recreation primary record.
Yes.
Was that something that the real estate agent gave out? Would the current owners have received a copy of that report when they purchased the house? Or did you just give that to us so we could see what we were dealing with?
Well, the DPR forms that you see at the end of your packet, the first one, several pages, is from the 2004 Citywide Historic Resource Survey. The second or latter couple of pages were from the more recent Citywide Historic Resource Survey that was undertaken just a couple of years ago. So the information relative to its Class 3 status is available on the city's website. And there is a narrative there talking about the potential significance of this home. These particular DPR forms were not provided by staff to a realtor or anybody else on this particular project.
Okay, and we learned that the terrazzo around the pool is gone, and I think in the report, this current owner wants to put brushed concrete down.
That's correct.
Do we have the authority to require anything other than more terrazzo?
Well, again, your consideration of this particular application tonight is not about what are the appropriate materials to restore this property, but rather only the question before you is, does the property appear to possess sufficient historic significance to warrant redesignation?
Okay,
So
I guess I just wanted my point made that brushed concrete is not acceptable to me. So-
Well, and what I would further clarify, Member Dixon, is that if you follow what this process may take, if you choose to take the recommendation of staff in the report, we will initiate the study and the application on this particular property, and we will bring you a report within a public hearing of the HSPB. That recommendation of the HSPB will be forwarded to the City Council and heard also at a public hearing. If the City Council determines that the house should be designated as a Class 1 or Class 2 site, they can do so. At that point, the alterations that the owner is considering would come back to the HSPB in the form of an application for a certificate of appropriateness. And at that time, you would be weighing in on the question of material selections and other design characteristics of the proposed alterations. So it would come forward assuming that the property does get designated as a Class 1 or Class 2. In the meantime, the stay of demolition prevents anything from happening at the site at this time.
Well, since I won't be around after June, I would like to go on the record saying that I would not accept a brushed concrete if it were in front of me right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon, and to Mr. Lyon for clearly clarifying what our mission is today with this review and asking a few more questions. Okay, Mr. Rosen now.
Not so much a question as that I think the staff report is on. I really appreciate this. This is a very important building in Las Palmas as well as all of Palm Springs. It's been well documented in magazines going back to the 60s. It's a very important building, and I do agree that we should pursue looking at the designation and seeing if it can be redesignated as a Class 2 or even a Class 1, which I think it should be as a Class 1. So thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kaiser.
I'm assuming that this report will come out of our very small budget. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I think that this house is worth spending it on. So I think that this should definitely be done. I'm not happy that it has to come out of our budget because it is so small that we can't even work through our list of things that we would like to bring up before the board. Be that as it may, this is a very important one. I just wish that the owners would have come forward and done that previously. I think they should be happy to have this designated. To resell this as a tax advantaged house would be terrific. That's the end of my comment.
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, question for staff. It says on page 5 of 9 of the report, in the second paragraph, that in mid-April, it was discovered that construction work on the home had commenced without permit and approval. Just wondering if staff can elaborate whether a call was put into staff or if a anonymous report was made by a code enforcement, or how they came to learn about this, if we could be privy to that information, please.
We were contacted because a building permit application for replacement of the swimming pool had been filed with the building department. And the building department forwarded that information over to the planning department. I contacted the pool contractor who had submitted the building permit application for the pool replacement. And we began discussing the scope of the project because it wasn't clear on the drawings that I had seen. With that, I began to ask if I could come out to the site and observe what the scope of the work was so I could better understand the condition of the terrazzo that was proposed to be demolished. And they agreed. So I called the subsequent week to make that site visit. And in speaking with the pool contractor, he admitted to me, he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Lyon, but to be honest with you, over the weekend, we actually demoed the pool and the terrace and it no longer exists." That's how we came to find out about the current work that was going on.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions of staff before we proceed? Mr. Miller?
So I have a question for Ken Lyon. Are we as a board limited to the 120-day stay as a first step? And if we need additional time to work on the report, or the report needs additional time to be finished, is there the ability to increase that 120 days beyond that period?
Yes, Member Miller, there is an ordinance stipulation that says 120-day stay, up to 120-day stay may be imposed, and an additional 60 days may be imposed if it requires so in order to complete the processing.
And that would take further action from the board?
It would probably take further action from the board. We would be reporting back. If we can't accomplish getting the report done and getting this back before both you and the city council in the period of 120 days, we would report back and request an extension on that stop work order.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions before moving on?
I have one other question, please, of staff. Will these owners be fined for the work they've done without permits?
Yes, in the making of the application for this item that is here before you tonight, the city's fee schedule requires that work that is done without permits or approvals is charged at double the cost of the application fee. And that was the case for their application fees that were submitted on this particular item before you today. The same stipulation holds true on building permits. When there's work done that would require a building permit for which a building permit was not issued, the penalties are that the application or the building permit fees are doubled.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, since we are still asking questions of staff, I think someone brought up a good point earlier about the DPR form at the end of our report. And if there could be a way for us through the city staff to provide the listing agent of Class 3 properties in the future with the DPR forms from the survey. I know that previous HSPBs have talked about working with realtors and the two desert agencies or listing services. So I would like to revisit that because I think it would be a fairly simple process to go down the Class 3 list of all those addresses and then to go into a service such as Redfin or Zillow And then we would get a notice when one of those addresses was listed for sale. And at that point, that could trigger sending the DPR form from the survey to that listing agent and asking that it be given to the eventual buyer.
Well, the class 3 list is available on the city's website. And the city staff has done a number of outreach efforts to the real estate board and many of their offices. I've spoken at their weekly meetings where the entire real estate board meets. I've also met in several of their individual offices and presented the ordinances and the listings and the processes and so on. To work up a system, as you're suggesting, of some type of automatic notification, while you believe it is simple, I don't believe it would be so simple, but it is certainly something that we could look into.
Thank you. I never intended to insinuate it would be simple.
Mr. Kaiser.
Can you give us an order of magnitude of what these fees, these application fees are and the fines are?
The application fee for request for review of a certificate of approval is, the basic fee is $1,848. So that amount was doubled in the case of this particular application. Came out at about $3,000 to $4,000.
That's sort of like the cost of doing business. If I had an investment like this, I would take the chance as well.
We won't quote you, Dan.
Thank you.
We'll quote you on that. So is there any further comments or questions for staff at this point? Last one. Okay, so is the applicant here and wants to speak?
The applicant is here. Mr. Armistead, if you'd like to turn on your camera and unmute your mic.
Okay, so we welcome Mr. Armistead, and you have 3 minutes if you would like to share some additional facts about your project for the board's consideration. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any of some of the questions that came up previously, but just a quick, I'm Paul Armistead. I'm a Seattle architect, 40 years of experience. And all I can tell you is that I regret that I didn't make myself aware of the municipal code. We used poor information when we purchased the house from Seattle and weren't aware of the municipal code, and particularly section 8.05, which I'm very aware of now. I sincerely appreciate Ken's work to educate us, but also what I really want to let you know is that we truly embrace the idea and do believe that this house is extremely important to Palm Springs, and we're working towards the idea of restoring it to make it very historical. And we talked about the fact that maybe we'd be putting plaques up or something, you know, in order to do that. And we've been trying to be very true to it. But I can only say that I'm sorry. It was a terrible thing that we've moved forward with, but hopefully we can represent that a lot of these things can be done properly as we move forward. When we acquired the property, we saw it as an opportunity to rescue it from, we'd seen it and been through it, it had been neglected and used as a makeshift museum for many years. And we thought this was our opportunity to restore it to the Alexander Estate by William Kreisel. I'd had an opportunity to meet William Kreisel when I did another one of his houses back in 2016 down in Fair Circle. And he was presenting his book, William Kreisel, Palm Springs, The Language of Modernism. And we had an opportunity to discuss, you know, a little bit about the restoration of his kinds of work. And so we love that. And we perceived, we sought out information from the Getty Museum. We're hoping to get more as COVID loosens things up. We did a Zoom call with Chris Minrad and subsequent meetings with him to discuss the appropriateness of what we were intending to do with the house and the most important historical aspects of it. He was very thoughtful and helpful. We researched the magazines and the publications to see the original things. And believe it or not, the Elvis's honeymoon videos were very helpful to tell us a little bit about the more modern history of why this house was never been able to be sold or lived in appropriately. And anyway, with that in mind, my bottom line here is, number one, I've got a goal, a request, and a hope. My goal is to be responsible and to responsibly restore the Alexander home of tomorrow back to its original design inspirations. And we know it's an iconic example of Palm Springs modernism and would embrace the Class 1 designation. And that's truly, we thought, what an opportunity, when we got it. Our request is that there could be perhaps a conditional stay of the demolition alteration that would allow us, because we had submitted for permit, which Ken wasn't aware of, for the interior renovations of the house. And that permit was languishing, and waiting. We were told it was going to be an over-the-counter permit, and dumb as an ox, we didn't know about, the Class 3 designation, and we're waiting for that to be done. Initially, when we bought the house, we thought it was going to be an aesthetic renovation. We were going to do, restore the sofa, get all the stuff fixed inside the house. We were going to figure out how to preserve those windows. And it wasn't until we got in there that we realized that the windows were going to have to be replaced. And the reason being is because none of the lower windows are tempered glass. The single pane made the house absolutely uninhabitable because of the heat gain and how much area. And so we worked very hard to put together ideas and proposals to absolutely, as closely as possible, with double glazing, restore the house with modern glazing. And the iconic ceiling that's going to read on through is all custom glazing with that'll be buried into the soffit and the ceilings. My hope is that, and the Title 24 is going to be ready to go probably later this week, and that would be part of our building permit application, which was initially made back in March. And we kept asking, how come we haven't received our permit? Where's our permit? And we got ahead of ourselves, and I apologize. Our hope is that we somehow, with the materials we gave Ken, is that we gave you enough information that you might be able to give us, that we could give you the confidence that we promise and assure you that we will proceed in a manner that was appropriate to this house as a Class 1 designation, and will implement it in that manner. Our original goal was to be able to showcase this house in the fall of October 15th through 17th, so the entire public could come through it and see it. And so I just want you to know that we embrace what you do and what your position is, and we understand why it's so important that you're there to protect the Palm Springs city, and we will work very hard to make sure that this house is done properly. So the conditional stay is my request so that we can move forward with the interiors. The issue with the windows is all the windows need to be removed and replaced from the interior of the house to protect the break-shaped forms that are on the exterior of the house. And so the window, with the 60-foot long sofa that's in the process of being restored right now, the windows need to happen before the interiors can be finished. But there is a substantial amount of interior work, getting our flooring fixed and cabinets and things like that. And I can get into whatever detail you like. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I put myself before you as somebody who pledges to do the right thing from this point forward.
Thank you for your expressing your good intentions and your dedication and passion to observe, all the standards and procedures. And of course, today, our mission is to recommend, placing a stay on the demolition of the property. And then, of course, directing staff to initiate an application, including historic resources. I can't answer, or we can't answer about the interior at this meeting. Perhaps Mr. Lyon might make a statement to that effect, if you would, please.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, and as you all know, the interiors of privately owned properties are not subject to HSPB review. Given that distinction, what Mr. Armistead is suggesting is that he would like the board to issue a conditional stay of demolition such that the work on the exterior of the home would be stayed. They could not move forward with exterior work, but he's requesting that you allow him to continue moving forward with getting a building permit and continuing work on the interior of the home. With that statement, he's also requesting that you allow him to do a complete replacement of all of the exterior glazing on the home. And from the report and his information that he's provided, he's identified that there's approximately 64 window units and door units on this home. I can give you my own concern or opinion that while the interior is not subject to HSPB review and might be appropriate to allow it to continue, the window work is very definitely part of the exterior envelope of the home. And at a staff level, if the board wishes to do some type of conditional stay, I would be very concerned about allowing the window work to continue, primarily because it really is the exterior skin of the home. And this particular structure, it represents an enormous area of the exterior envelope of the home. So I don't know if the board technically can do a conditional stay. I had discussed this with Mr. Armistead earlier. I said, I don't know if that's something that's feasible or not, but if you chose to go in that direction, and maybe Director Fagg can jump in with any of his insights on this, but I would be worried about allowing the window work to continue at this time.
Mhm. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Hanson?
Yes, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Lyon. But it seems to me that if the board doesn't have the authority over interior alterations, then a conditional stay is kind of moot because we can't do that anyway. But given that, this sort of mushing up the idea of the windows with the interiors is definitely would be worrisome to me. It's absolutely part of the exterior of the house. And I concur, or I believe 100% that there should be a stay on any further work on the windows as part of the stay of demolition, which I think, goes without saying.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, changing course of topic a little bit, since we're able to discuss this, I wanted to bring up 3 distinct points. The first, going back to the sale of the house, and I went to the listing and read the language, and it does say historic home. So clearly, when Mr. Armistead spoke, he knew he was purchasing a historic home. So we'll just leave it at that. The listing agent, Scott Histon, is recently named by Thompson's Life magazine as one of the top producing agents in the Valley. And I know him personally, and he takes great pride in marketing and selling historic properties. Likewise, the buyer's agent, Mark Sanders, is the man responsible for rescuing and restoring the Frank Sinatra House in Palm Springs on Alejo Road. Also one of the top producing real estate agents in the Valley. So I would have to give props to both those agents for, promoting the property correctly. I'm confident that the seller knew what they were getting, and the buyer knew what they were getting. On that note, I will say that at our March meeting, I did kind of make a warning about this house, and lo and behold, it came true. So unfortunately, it seems like despite all of the progress in Palm Springs with that ordinance and our board, a lot of what happened today is still reactionary instead of proactive. And I wish there was a way that we could just wave a magic wand and change that to make it more proactive. There's got to be something we can do, maybe at an annual symposium, or maybe we can have a special meeting. There's got to be something we can do to stop this cautionary tale of all this reactionary stuff that goes on. This house should have been designated a long, long, long ago. And the local organizations should take note that there was more work to be done that wasn't done. And it's unfortunate, as Member Kaiser said, that this has to come out of our budget when we had a great work plan for 5 or 6 other properties. And then finally, just to say, in reading this report and looking at all the photos and listening to the architect, I would like to commend them on the effort that they are attempting to undertake. It looks like they are really sympathetic to the house, and they really have the heart in the right place. I know firsthand from having been in the house that it was a disgrace. And going outside to the pool area, that terrazzo was just so compromised. And there was evidence of water damage and sun damage. And, that of course had to come out because it's nearly impossible to restore terrazzo back to perfection when it's so badly compromised. That being said, the original vision was for this indoor-outdoor feeling, which is so tantamount to the vision of Kreisel and so many other mid-century architects, that what starts inside continues outside. In this case, I do not believe that terrazzo is any longer effective outside, mainly because that is the west part of the house. So that terrazzo would be in the full afternoon sun for the better part of the entire day. And sun is not terrazzo's friend, just like water isn't. So I would be actually in favor of replacing that terrazzo with the brushed concrete that they have proposed, just as a more practical, long-term alternative. Plus, having terrazzo around the pool gets very, very hot. And just a lot of maintenance. I know people who've had these floors outside, and it's just impossible to deal with. So that's one thing that I can give the applicant points for, among many others. And that's really everything I have at this time.
Okay. And I know we'll be addressing those materials and uses at a different time. But today, we're looking at the recommendation for, the place of stay, for demolition, and then direct staff to initiate, the application, for historic resources. So is there any more discussion? Mrs. Dixon?
I have one question of Mr. Amistad. Mr. Amistad, you will be the one that will benefit if this house is designated a Class 1 historic site. Would you be willing to pay for the historic report?
I would absolutely, it's part of our makeup, our intention was not to be stupid. Our intention was to restore this house. And so I would be happy to talk with, I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about in terms of dollars. The reality of this house is that the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the windows are costing, and the fact that they're on order, and obviously that's going to impact us to cancel the order on the windows and lose our deposits. But yes, yes, I would certainly entertain that, because I embrace what you guys do. You know, I can only tell you that I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus that worked with us on this project when we were buying it. I've been around the block long enough to know, you know, I mean, I restored one of Chrysler's houses back in 2017. We did another house in 2018. And honestly, the historic aspect of either of those never came up. And I just, you know, from CFR, I apologize. So yes, I would entertain that, certainly.
Okay,
I
thank
mean,
you.
it's important.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience and your intent to do good work here. And I'm sure that Mr. Lyon can speak to you about that, and maybe we could move forward in that direction. So any other comments or questions before we proceed? In any last words? Okay, so seeing no further comments, may I have a motion, please? Mr. Nelson?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to follow staff recommendation that the HSPB place a 120-day demolition or alteration on the property pursuant to Municipal Code Section 8.05.030, and direct staff to initiate an application, including historic resource report, possibly to be paid for by the applicant, in order to determine the eligibility of the property as a Class 1 historic site, and to present the findings at a notice hearing of the HSPB.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Nelson and a second by Ms. Dixon. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. So thank you all and Mr. Amistad for participating in this discussion. Let's proceed to agenda item 5A. This is the 2021 Preservation Matters Symposium. But first of all, I would like to congratulate Dick Burkett and his team of many wonderful experts for launching a fabulous virtual symposium. I know it's very successful and so great. And so I'd like to invite Mr. Burkett to give us a report.
It would be my pleasure. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge the board again for the important dialogue that you've had with these discussions tonight. I'm very, very encouraged, and yeah, kudos to all of you. So I'm also very happy to talk about the event's success for this year. You know, we went into this doing it virtual. We'd never done that before, so we had no idea. That was another whole experience with a lot of recording that we took into consideration, but I don't think to the point that we thought it would take. But the good news is that we ended up with 420 registrations for this year's event. And the majority of those indicated just one registration. However, as I received a notification, each time there was a registration, there were numerous familiar names that I'm confident the spouse or the partner would also be viewing the event. So if one were to take as a conservative estimate, let's say 33% of the registrants, there were two viewing the event, this would equate to 558 pairs of eyeballs. If 50% were to viewing, the number would be 640, but I think we should just consider the more conservative 33% estimate. And just so that sort of as a comparison, our sold out audiences at the convention center for the prior 2 years were 400. So from that standpoint, I'm delighted to make this report. Also, the stats from the city IT department as to the number of views as of Monday was 719. But putting that into context, very likely attendees were watching in segments, which is what we were hoping that they would do. From a marketing viewpoint, we expanded the sources a great deal this year, which included some out-of-area organizations since the event was virtual. So maybe for 2022, assuming the event is live again, that it could be filmed and shared for many, many outside our geographical area. So once again, I just want to mention the power of the local organizations as being major contributors with their e-blast and newsletters. Every time, and I watched it carefully, each day I noted when there was an e-blast by an organization, up went the registrations. So I went back through and did a calculation, and on that basis of the records I kept, and those organizations accounted for about 40% of our total registrations. So the point of that is, for the event to be successful, yearly indications have shown that the organization's support is vital for the event to be successful. And also, for the last couple of years now, have also supported the event with presentations, which makes a huge, huge difference. So just a quick kudos to and a huge thank you to the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation, the Palm Springs ModCom, the Palm Springs Historical Society, Preservation Mirage, the local desert chapter of AIA, 1PS, and the Palm Springs Architectural Alliance. Also, there was a great response from the e-blasts that were sent to the 2018-2019 attendees. And we were able to combine those two years as far as the attendees were concerned, and to eliminate all duplications. So then what can happen then this year, you'll be able to add the 2021, and you will have a really great composite to work with and going forward to promote the event coming up. Actually, we sent out event invitations to 37 different sources. So we were very fortunate, I think, to have coverage this year by Channel 3 with the interview at the Shea residence and the Desert Sun article. So just in closing, we've received a proposal for our presentation for the 2022 event already. And in listening to your deliberations tonight, I see an opportunity for a presentation on late modern in 2022. So there you go. You already got two on the boards to take a look at. So it's definitely a team effort, and thanks again for the subcommittee, Catherine and Dan, along with our council, which was very, very important, from Ken and Flynn and David Newell and the city's IT staff. And then having Deborah and Richard, I just want to say again, handling the production makes a huge difference in the success of the event. They're truly masters. And I'm very grateful that the city has continued to allow us to have this event and supported it. So, gang, here's to a successful 2022 Preservation Matters back at the Convention Center with the tours and after celebration. So I'll see you there. Thank you.
Give a big hand to Mr. Burkett. Wow, you just,
No.
wow, wow, wow. What a great success and what a wonderful production. I knew you worked on it for, what, 2 years? Yeah, almost. You worked on it for 2 years. So it was a lot of labor and for education. So we can't thank you enough. And so you're at the top of the list on the committee for next year. I'm writing your name down right now. So super wonderful. Thank you so much.
It was a team effort, Catherine. I don't want all the credit, really.
No, but you have to have leaders. You're a leader and so experienced, so knowledgeable, so passionate. I could go on and on, but I think that we should go on to.
Yeah.
So that completes our agenda for today. And are there any comments from the board? No. Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two things. The first about Vincent Marsh, who passed away in February, and he was a former HSPB member. There was an estate sale in March at his home in Rocket Club Garden Villa, and I was able to go to that and told a few other people who were able to go last minute. Unfortunately, it wasn't very well publicized. But Mr. Marsh had a huge collection of incredible volumes of books related to architecture, preservation, you name it. I was just flabbergasted and overwhelmed. I mean, it was just so overwhelming, I couldn't believe it. I managed to get 5 or 6 books, but in one of the rooms, there were piles and piles and piles that said that they were meant to go to Cal Poly. And the survivors were so overwhelmed with his estate and with the collection that he had. And with COVID, they weren't able to get things allocated properly. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I know that the city has a reference library that Mr. Lyon has there in the planning office. And it is my understanding that city staff consults these periodicals and books and reference materials, and that HSP board members can go in and look at such materials upon request. So I would ask that in the future, when we have board members, if we somehow figure out a way or ask if they would be willing to donate, a small percentage of their collection as pertains to Palm Springs architecture and history to the city to add to that reference library. So that's just a thought. And then the other thing is whether or not there's an update on the Racket Club. At our last meeting, city staff had said that they were communicating with the owner to develop a demolition plan for the non-contributing building. And I would just like to get an update on that if possible. Also, supposedly there was a small fire at the Racket Club recently. And I don't know if city staff can shed any light on that. And that's all from me.
Okay. Just regarding the library, if I can ask Mr. Lyon, so the city of Palm Springs, it does have a library. Do you catalog your books? Is it I know you don't probably have a librarian. Is there a staff person that tends to those books at the city? I don't happen to know.
Well, we don't really have a library per se, as Member Nelson characterized. We have a very, very limited number of various books. Most of my reference material that I use comes from my own collection. I've got quite a few books on Palm Springs, and of course, as a licensed architect, I've got my own piles and piles of books. So I tend to use those quite a bit. I had heard, although I don't have any verification of it, but I had heard that Mr. Marsh's books were going to be donated to the Palm Springs Library. Now, I don't know if that took place or not, but I had initially learned of Vincent's passing from Jeannie Kays, the library director, because she had been contacted by the estate asking if the library wanted them. So I don't know if his books actually went to Cal Poly or whether they went to the Palm Springs Library, but hopefully they did find a home where they can be referenced by members of the public.
Mhm. And then two other libraries that I want to mention is, the College of the Desert. They have a library and a librarian, and have a good collection. And of course, the Palm Springs Art Museum has a library, and we have a whole section on architecture and design, and cataloged and reference and all that. So there are other resources within our city, being those that I've named. So just wanted to comment on that. So any other board member comments today? Okay. Does staff have any comments?
Yes, in response to Member Nelson's inquiry, we have reached out. I actually put out a third email to the owners of the Racket Club seeking their input on the proposed demolition plan. And I have not heard back yet from them, but we still are trying to get information from them about what the demolition plan is likely to be. I had heard rumor that there was a small fire there, but I don't know any of the details about that. So if anybody here in the meeting knows something about that, you're welcome to share it, but I do not have any other information about it. The other things that I wanted to report on is that we are preparing the Goldberg residence for your consideration at a public hearing at your June meeting, and Joanne Brueggemann's here in this office is working to put together site visits of that particular site. Listening to the conversations about informing the real estate committee, it may be appropriate for us to reach out again to the Board of Realtors and see if they would be interested in us giving another presentation. Maybe we need to do this annually or biannually in order to help inform their members of the city's preservation ordinance, so that we can avoid situations that we have here with the Ladera Circle House. It's nobody likes having these kinds of things occur, and it's painful for everybody involved to deal with things when they've been taken on without permits and approvals. So maybe it's time for us to go back out and do our dog and pony show with the realtors in the community. I think that's the extent of my comments. I see Flynn's come on, so maybe Flynn has some additional things.
Yes, I do, Mr. Lyon. Madam Chair and members of the board, just speaking to the topic of the department library, I have in my office a very small collection, but growing, of reference materials on Palm Springs, and would be happy to add to that collection and make it available to anyone who wanted to borrow it. Again, it is a small collection. But other than that, there were also comments made about the budget for historic preservation. I'm happy to report that our draft budget, which goes to City Council on Thursday night, includes a restoration of the budget for historic preservation as we've had in years past, which is approximately about $53,000 is what we've had in the past. Because of the drop in revenues related to COVID this past year, as many of you are aware, our budget was cut substantially, and so we've had very little funding this year. But happy to report that as of July 1st, we do anticipate that our budget will be restored. And so that will give us the opportunity to begin the historic resource reports on those items that the board has placed on their list, their work list, as well as doing some work on some of the DPR forms for Class 3 properties that you all have identified. So again, good news on the budget, and we hope the City Council supports that. And that's it for me.
Any other discussion, anything? So seeing no further discussions, the meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board is adjourned to the regular meeting of Tuesday, June 1st at 5:30 p.m. So thanks for all of your participation today, and we'll see you in June, if not before.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Bye-bye.